Okay. Welcome to Book Carnival in Orange, California. And tonight we're delighted to have John Gray with us. He's a horror author, at least this time around. This is his first book called The Desecrated. And John, I'm going to bring you front and center. I always like to have my authors where we can focus on them. There you are, in glorious Technicolor. Welcome to Book Carnival. So nice to be able to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we talk about your book, you have quite a varied background.
I do.
In film and in other things. Would you like to touch on that just a little bit and what led then up to writing a book?
Well, you know, I've always been a writer of one kind or another.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very fortunate that I've had a long career in Hollywood, you know, writing and directing movies and television for a long time. And I've always wanted to write a novel. It's always been on my bucket list. It's always been something I've been very passionate about doing. And it's been very difficult always to find the time to do it. And so when the pandemic hit and all my projects dried up or just stopped or just got postponed or just died on the vine, I thought this is the time. This is, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been noodling this idea for quite a while. And so I just decided to, well, it's just a perfect time to do it. Just buckle down, be home, and just put in the hours and get it done. And I was lucky enough to pull it off.
Well, it sounds like a good thing to be doing with a pandemic. And I hadn't thought about the fact that other venues would not be available for a while, especially in the beginning when things were, you weren't sure how to deal with anything. So that was a perfect timing thing for you anyway, in this regard.
It was, and you know, it wasn't that big an adjustment because my wife and I work from home anyway.
Okay.
We're shooting, then we're off on location somewhere. But you know, normally when I write my scripts, we kind of work at home, so it wasn't that foreign an idea for us to to do it. It was just a little strange because there was nothing else going on except this. So that was a bit odd, but you know, I was grateful to have the time, and you know, we were grateful to have a place to be that was comfortable and nice and
safe, reasonably safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Much better than that. You said you've been wanting to write for a long time. Was it specifically horror, or was it? Did you have something else in mind?
You know, I just the idea of writing a novel has always appealed to me because in my screenwriting all these years, and all the screenwriters out there will know what I'm talking about. You know, you spend so much time trying to be economic, trying to adhere to a certain running time. You have to limit in some ways what you can really explore when you're writing for the screen, and it's fun, it's challenging, and you can still do fantastic work. But you just have to do it in within those parameters of economy. And I've always wanted to have the freedom that I perceived a novel would offer me in terms of delving into backstories and spending time going down a little back alley in some character's background and using that to shine a light on who this character is. And you know, in television and film writing, those are normally the things that get thrown away first. If it's not completely germane to what you're doing, there's no time for it.
Right.
So I had always promised myself someday I would do that and have that freedom. And it was a great liberating thing to finally write a novel. Also, a very steep learning curve. It's a different. But it was so challenging and very rewarding. And the idea that I did a horror one, I do love horror. It's just one of my favorite genres. It was as a kid. I just love being frightened, and I love frightening people. I tend to be more attracted to a gothic horror, not so much slasher, horror.
Right.
more psychological terror. Although I must say that Desecrated has its moments of gore. There's no doubt about it. But I do prefer, the Gothic images, the cemeteries and the morgues and that kind of, fun stuff. But mostly I'm interested in characters and how they respond to each other and to the worlds they're in. And in the world of horror, of course, you get to do that in an extreme way. But I'm also interested in all kinds of character-driven drama. And I've always been in my film work and television work. And, it's always, to me, it's always about the characters, whether I choose to do a project or not, is always about whether I can connect with somebody in this piece that I feel I have something in common with, that I can resonate with.
I think that's what makes this book so rich, is that you have done just that. Too many horror books just plan on frightening you at different spots or attempting to. You've done a lot more than that with this.
Well, thank you. I take that as high praise from you, for sure.
Well, look at the people who have blurbed your book. James Blaylock, pretty high marks there. Harlan Coben, another great author, and Jay, and I'm going to mess his last name up, but the gentleman from Walking Dead.
Jay Bodensanger. Yeah.
Thank you. I knew you'd help me there. Those are people who have been highly qualified to judge whether it's a good book or not, and they gave you some wonderful blurbs.
Yes, I was very happy with that. Yeah, I feel like, again, just going back to character, I don't feel like you can be truly frightened in a novel or a movie unless you're invested in the people and you care about the people. And to me, that's always the tell for a good horror story or a poor horror story. Are the scares there just for the sake of scares, or is it organic to the story and the characters? And are you really worried that something's going to happen to these people you love?
Well, you have a unique character. Jennifer Shelby has left college for, I won't even comment on what reason. I'll let you go into that. And she wants some quiet, and she decides the morgue is the place to find it. I don't know. I think, thinking as a woman, I think I could find quiet somewhere else.
Probably,
so
yes.
I found that rather unique.
Right. Well,
tell us how that came about.
Yeah, well, it's kind of an interesting way this whole thing came about. But with Jennifer herself, she was already sort of, taking pre-med classes in college. Her goal was to go to medical school and become a doctor. And then her father becomes very, very ill. And her father was a single father, and they were very, very close. And so she gave up school to take care of him, determined not to have him be put in an institution or facility. And he has a mental problem, a mental illness, and becomes worse and worse. And ultimately he does die. And with him goes all her tuition money. So at 20 years old, she is just sort of alone in the world, can't go back to school, and really doesn't know what to do, where to turn next. And one of her professors is friends with a manager of the New York City morgue. And so he arranges for her to have this job. And oddly enough, it just feels exactly right to her to work the night shift by herself. She's studied enough medicine to know that she's not really freaked out by dead people. And she feels like this will be a chance for her to kind of get her head together and figure out what's next, to grieve, and to sort of put her life back together. And then into her life, completely, she doesn't see this coming at all, but comes this larger than life, charismatic English movie star, action movie star named Trevor Price, who is sentenced to community service at the morgue. And he is sentenced, he is going to work with her on the night shift. And so thus begins this conflict-ridden relationship between the two of them. They can't stand each other. But as he settles in there, suddenly very, very scary things start happening at the morgue. And she begins to believe that his presence there is stirring up some really bad things. So that's the basic setup, for the novel. And what's interesting about it is that it's sort of based on a real thing. I think it was back in 2015, I came across this article in the news that there was a famous movie star. I don't know if I should mention her name or not. I won't for the time being.
Okay.
But it was like her umpteenth DUI, and she was sentenced to community service at the LA County morgue. Oh. And I was just so struck by that. What was that like for her coworkers to have suddenly this big movie star in their midst in a morgue? Mm-hmm. And so that was always an interesting idea that just kind of stayed in my head for a long, long time. And I started noodling around with it and changing it. And I thought, well, maybe what if the movie star was actually a guy, and the person that this sort of persecutes is this woman who's trying to put her life back together again. And that's sort of how it started. And I ultimately ended up speaking to the head of the LA County morgue, who talked to me about that movie star and what that experience was like for them and how they treated her. So it was a good jumping off point for a novel.
Certainly a different way to do it. And I didn't realize that people got sentenced to the morgue. I'm assuming this is for auto accidents, to show you what happens if you're not careful.
Right. I just thought that's a judge with a great sense of humor. I don't know what the real purpose was of that, but yeah.
And I detected that there is some humor in your book as well.
There is. There is I think a lot of character-driven humor. I love humor. I think people are very funny, and every character in this film. I'm sorry, in this novel, films later, has their own particular kind of quirk. Each one of them has their own agenda, something they're trying to accomplish in their lives, something they're trying to get done. Some of it's sort of, heartbreaking. A lot of it's funny. Some of it's criminal. And indeed, by the end of the novel, we've uncovered this enormous criminal enterprise going on at the morgue, which ties into why the morgue is haunted at this particular point in time. So I in my own life, I love quirky characters. I come from Brooklyn. I grew up with, a circus full of quirky, funny people. It's always funny because the cliche of working class people they're all so often portrayed as dumb and these, dems, and those, But I grew up in a very working class neighborhood in Brooklyn, and the people I grew up with were really smart. They may not have been incredibly educated, but they were smart and funny and sarcastic, and you couldn't bullshit them. They were insightful. So I always carry those characters with me, and I always have in my films, and now in I hope the plural novels.
That's wonderful. And yes, I agree with you that neighborhoods of diverse people are fantastic. I grew up in Chicago with the same type of thing.
Right.
And so you never forget that.
Right. Exactly.
You have a new fan already. She said, that's frightening already, working the night shift at the morgue. And then goes on to ask, how easy, hard was it to go from script writing to novel writing? And you've touched base on some of that, but perhaps you want to elaborate a little.
It was very difficult. Like I said, steep learning curve, and I had a real problem breaking out of the style of writing that I had developed over 30 years as a screenwriter, which was to be, spare and economic, and you're relying on the camera to show the audience what they're seeing, and you're describing that. In a novel, you've got to just plant that picture in the reader's head, and you don't have that advantage. And my wife, Melissa Peltier, who is a brilliant person in every way, and also a brilliant novelist in her own right, she kind of unlocked the whole thing for me one day because she read a first draft of a novel and was less than impressed, and is not shy about saying that. And her big problem was that she found it was just too simple and straightforward, and she likened it to being a production designer in a movie. And she said, "You've got to be your own production designer. You've got to describe the set for the reader. You've got to describe what's happening in it, the flavor of it, what's it smell like, what's it." And once she gave me that key, it suddenly just clicked into place, and I was able to now start over from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
But with that template in mind, which was just enormously helpful.
Does sound like it would be, yes.
Yeah.
It's, oops, let me know. I've got one more person here. We don't want to ignore them. We want everybody we can, right? You said perhaps a film later. There was some little comment when you mentioned the book, soon to be a film or possibly a film.
Yes, we are. My wife and I produce movies together, and we want to produce a feature version of this book. And I already have a script, and we're just now starting that process. Uphill.
Sandy, please. Sandy, please. Okay.
Sandy's
Sandy?
also in slow motion.
Yeah. Please mute yourself. That's okay. We do editing.
Right.
Sandy, can you hear me? Okay. John speaks, so it goes back to you. That is so weird.
Kind of scary. This could be my next novel.
I think
that goes to the background of your book, right?
you can mute her, I think. You can
Well,
mute.
I'm trying. Sandy, can you hear me? Where is she? Okay.
I think we did it.
All right. Let's hope that works. All right. Sorry, she was off the screen. That's why I couldn't find her. We'll edit. So
in any case, we are trying to get a movie made from it. There's no more difficult time than right now to get a movie made. Although horror is kind of an evergreen genre, which people just always seem to be interested in it, always want to see it. So we're hopeful in the next year or so we can get that done.
that's wonderful. And I think it would be really great right now. We're all numb from what we've been going through over the last 2.5, 3 years, and we need something. The movies really have to jump out at us. Because we've watched, we're stone dead watching so many things on television or anything that's produced, and something that's kind of out of the norm. We haven't had a lot of horror movies made. Is that a true thing? I mean, recently.
Yeah, I mean, there. I guess there's probably not as many as there once were, for sure. But they're out there. There's a whole cadre of incredibly passionate young filmmakers who love horror, and will make a horror movie come hell or high water. And sometimes they won't get released. Sometimes they'll only get released on streaming platforms. And I shouldn't say only now, because that's a really legitimate and very potent way to be released. But there's just always an appetite for horror, it seems.
Well, it's an escape from reality, and we all need to do that right now.
Yes, exactly.
Without monsters or superheroes, just plain old horror. I remember that as a child, finding some books that they were very subtle, but that fear built up in that atmosphere. And the ghost came wafting down the stairs type of thing.
Right. I remember as a kid in Brooklyn, there was a movie theater called the Fortway. And, it was one of these kind of, at one time had been a palace, back in the 40s and 50s. And in the 70s, when I kind of came of age, it was fading and it was kind of peeling, and It wasn't, it was on its last legs, but for me, it was still like a, place of dreams. And I would go to these horror movies there, Saturday matinees. I go by myself most of the time, and I just loved it. And I remember when I got too frightened about what was on the screen, they had this glow in the dark clock on the upper wall. And so I would just turn my head and stare at that clock and look at the kind of green, incandescent glow of that clock. So I thought it was better, and cut to, 35 years later, whatever it was, we're at a film festival in upstate New York, and I'm in this old theater, and there's that clock, the exact same clock from when I was, 11 years old. It was just amazing. They wouldn't sell it to me though. I tried.
That was going to be my next question. Did you get it?
No, I couldn't get it.
That is a shame. Another question we've got here is, what was your first break as a writer-director?
Well, really what I was doing was I was determined, I was very lucky in that I knew from a very, very young age that this is what I wanted to do. Like, 10, 11 years old, I knew.
Seriously?
I did. I thought I wanted to be an actor because I thought the actors just did it all. That was my only experience. My portal was watching actors on TV and movies. I just thought they did it. And so I used to put on little dramas behind my apartment building. There was a loading dock. And, if you squinted, it could look like a stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to put on plays starring me back there, and all my little friends would come, and it was a disaster always. They would make fun of me and throw things and all that. But nevertheless, I would get frustrated that I couldn't control what my little audience, such as they were, was looking at. Like, if I pulled out a gun, I wanted them to see the gun and then see a frightened face and then see the trigger pull. And I couldn't isolate those things on stage. And so I started thinking about I could do that with a camera. I could do that with pictures. And so I got my hands on an 8mm camera of my uncle's. And then I started making movies. And that's when I really understood that there was another consciousness behind the camera. And the actors were important, but they were just part of the whole tapestry of what a movie is. So, I had that going for me in that I knew what I wanted to do. I was too stupid, frankly, to know how difficult it would be. As someone from Brooklyn, my father was an iron worker. I had no connection, I had nothing. So how do you do it? And I just went forward. I just kept making movies. I kept writing scripts. And finally, I wrote a script after about 10 or 11 years of this that got the attention of an agent. We were trying to get a certain actor to be in, we were trying to get Robert Duvall to be in the script. And we did a total, what they used to call an over the transom submission to his agent. Just like, you don't know me, I don't know you, but I really like Mr. Duvall. He'd be great in this movie. What do you think?
I've heard about those.
Yeah, we had no business thinking this would work, and at that time I was making a living giving out tickets for CBS television shows when they were testing the shows with audiences. So I'd recruit an audience off the street to go in and look at the show. Mm-hmm. There was a phone booth, for those of us who remember phone booths, on 53rd and 5th, and that was my office. I used to answer that phone call, John Gray's office, and the phone rang one time, and it was his agent. It was Fred Spector from CAA, who was a huge agent. And it turned out that he actually loved the script. And he thought that Bobby might want to do it. And I said, Bobby? Yes, Duvall. Bobby. Oh, Bobby. Bobby Duvall, of course. And that was really, I ended up signing with Fred Spector. And I said to him, Fred, of course, I want to be a director. Of course you do. Let's start with the writing and see how that goes. And so that was really the moment where once I signed with Fred, I was on a trajectory at that point where I didn't have to have any other job from then on except writing and then ultimately directing. It was still an uphill battle, but at least I could leave the starvation job behind, the bartending, selling cookbooks, all the stuff we do.
Mhm.
And so that was sort of the break. And that movie did eventually get made. It took another few years to make that film, but the agent was able to use that as a sample script to get me other jobs. And slowly but surely, I started to make some headway. That's kind of a long-winded answer to that question.
No, but it's fascinating because there were lucky breaks, there was determination, talent, obviously. Did you get to direct that first one, or did you have to pass that off?
No, I got to direct it, and Robert Duvall did not do it, but Carl Malden did, and Joyce Van Patten, and a very exciting young actor named Lenny Von Dolen at the time. And we made it for $1.5 million, shot it in Boston. And it was just a great experience. You know, it made very little money, you know, came and went. But it was, you know, for me, it was just, I got to live that particular dream and made that movie.
No, that's wonderful. It's a story you always like to hear about someone actually achieving the dream that they've had.
Yes, very lucky.
No, wonderful. For those that might not know, tell us about some other films that we would recognize.
Well, I was very fortunate in that I sort of got my foothold in Hollywood during what I felt was sort of like a golden age of movies for television. You know, it was past the era when they were just kind of crappy things that they would just, you know, shove out there every week. I was able to really, and because I could write, they would come to me with really juicy projects, you know, sometimes based on books. I got to do a movie about the relationship between Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, with Sean Hayes playing Jerry Lewis and the great English actor Jeremy Northam playing Dean Martin. The fantastic experience, you know, recreating all the nightclubs of the 40s and 50s and just dealing with their relationship, which was so tumultuous and so dramatic.
Yes, I remember the film.
Oh, good, great, yes, great. And I was also always a Civil War buff. Love history, still love history. My wife and I are both history nuts. And I got to do 2 Civil War era movies. Back again, you know, so lucky, back when TNT was making these big historical dramas, and they spent a fortune on them. And so I got to make a movie about the Lincoln assassination called The Day Lincoln Was Shot, based on the Jim Bishop book. And I got to make a movie about the first submarine used in combat during the Civil War. Also for TNT with Donald Sutherland and Armand Asante. And it was just a great experience because TNT there was no price they wouldn't spend to make it good. So it was great, just wonderful experience in making films like that. And I did a very big miniseries for CBS called Haven, which was about the Holocaust with Natasha Richardson and Anne Bancroft and Martin Landau. And it was an enormous movie that was all consuming.
Yes.
But I've been very fortunate that I've been able to travel, and go to places in the world where, as a guy from Brooklyn, I probably never would have really had the chance to go. But it's this fantastic life I've been able to have as a filmmaker that has allowed me to travel to these places and learn about them. And, you know, you get to, when you make a movie in a certain place, you get to live there long enough to know what it's like to really live there. You know, you're not just a tourist.
No, it sounds wonderful.
It's just been great.
There's one person, the first movie that you made that you said you were so lucky with, they wanted to know the title, to hear the title again.
That movie is called Billy Galvin.
Billy Galvin?
Yes, Galvin.
Okay. Huh. Okay. I'm writing it down in case somebody else wants to know.
Yeah.
And then what author / book or film has spooked you?
Oh, well, I mean, it goes without saying, of course, Stephen King, you know, so let's not even dwell on that because we all know. Peter Straub, I think, is a really terrifying author. And I still, to this day, feel that The Exorcist is, it's just a classic horror novel and movie. It has all the elements. It's got the characters, it's got the emotion, it's got the mythology. It's about something. And I mean, I still am terrified to watch that film, today. And there's also an interesting, I think it's an Australian film called The Babadook. And it may be maybe the scariest film I've maybe ever seen, or among them anyway. If anybody has a chance to see it, I highly recommend you see it. I'm sorry, I can't think of the filmmaker's name. Very small film and absolutely terrifying.
And you loved every minute of it, I can tell.
I did, absolutely did. Because I'm not easy to scare at this point. I mean, I've seen so many horror movies. It takes a lot to scare me, even though I could sit there and say, oh, that's a scary moment. Not for me, but I can see how that's a scary moment.
Right.
But there are some movies like The Babadook where I was suddenly like, wow, I think I have to put the lights on.
Let's see if we have any more questions over here. What do you see happening next? That's my question while I scroll down here.
Well, there's a few things. I have an idea for a second novel, which is not supernatural in nature, but is a thriller. I'm outlining that now. And I'm working with Warner Brothers on another television series, which is that is a supernatural show. And we're going out to networks and streamers with that this month. And I've also, my wife and I, Melissa and I, have been making short films. And that's something that I've just been loving. It's like back to my roots as a kid.
Yes.
And it's a way that I stay sane during the very, very slow pace of any kind of Hollywood development. I can make a 10-minute film. I can shoot it in a couple of days. I put together my crew and actors I want to work with, and we all have a blast just making these things. And then they go into film festivals, which just a whole other world that we've discovered that we love. We love traveling there to these film festivals and meeting other filmmakers and talking to the filmmakers and watching other movies. And I get a chance, I do seminars and classes, and I get a chance to pass on whatever it is I've gleaned over the years. I love to pass that on. So with all that stuff going on, it's been very busy, but it's just we just love it. We just love those festivals.
Well, they've always seemed wonderful. We don't hear about them enough, the general public, but they're always from such interesting countries and such varied subjects.
Yes.
That it must be very satisfying to be at something like that and actually meet these people and see it in person.
It's great, and particularly in the genre of short films, because people love short films. They almost always sell out when you go to these festivals. And I think even if it's just cynical, I think you sit there and go, well, if there's something comes on that I hate, it'll be over in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and I'll be on to the next thing. So I think people are more willing to give it a shot. But it's so. In fact, there's a festival here in Nyack, and we have 2 short films playing in that festival. And I was there last night, and I got to see 3 really interesting short films from Iran. And so the sensibility is so different than ours, and so interesting, and yet it's all universal stuff because it's about people. It's about people struggling. Everyone's fighting their own battle, and it's so unifying in that way to sit there and watch these films from all corners of the world. Just love it.
Well, and isn't it more difficult to do a short film and really tell a story in that short a period of time?
I think it is. I do. I mean, it's we try really hard with our short films to we love twists and turns and to surprise the audience, but also to try to make the audience feel something. And this is something I used to have arguments with friends of mine, years ago, talking about the relative skill necessary to do big studio action movies as opposed to doing little intimate dramas. And I always felt like, there's kind of nothing to it to do a big action movie, really. if you've got all the resources you need. You have the time and you have the money. It's a matter of physics. This is going to explode. That's going to go through the window. This guy's going to fall. I mean, it's really not that tough. But put two people in a room and make something happen between them that you care about. That's hard, because there's just that's just pure talent that can do that, and nothing else. Just so I don't know how I got off on that, but that's.
Watching you talk about these, you light up. You're just you can tell the love that you feel for what you're doing. I think that's refreshing. Another question: have you had a supernatural experience?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
This is another one involving my wife and I. And oddly enough, I was lucky enough to have a TV series on CBS called Ghost Whisperer. And this was a supernatural show, Jennifer Hewitt. And I was shooting the pilot in Orange back in like 2005, I think it was. And my wife and I had just moved into a house, not the house we're in now, but another house not too far from us here in Nyack. And we had been experiencing some odd things in the house once we moved in. The typical kind of like creaking staircase. Boy, it sure sounds like footsteps. And then we'd lie in bed at night and we'd hear above us what sounded like people moving furniture in the attic above us. And the attic was like this wide. I mean, you could barely get your head and shoulders up in that attic. And so we just didn't know what to make of this. And now it can't be. There's got to be some animal on the roof. And so we're just in total denial this is anything bad. But it starts to slowly escalate. And I'm now in LA. I'm in a hotel. I'm shooting the pilot. My wife is here. She's going to join me, but she hasn't yet. And she calls me and says, so there's something really weird down in the basement by the laundry machine. There's something really cold down there. And there's just an atmosphere that just feels menacing. I don't want to even be down there. And again, footsteps that have no explanation. And then she calls me and says, so the doorbell's been ringing and there's nobody there.
Oh.
I say, okay, so this is, I feel helpless. I'm 3,000 miles away, and it's just someone playing a prank on her. Well, I don't know what this is. It keeps happening. It keeps calling me. And I said, look, just, there's a pair of wire cutters in the cabinet. Just cut the bell. We'll figure it out later, but just stop it. So at least it stops. And she does that. And then about an hour later, she calls me. He's okay, I'm in a hotel. And I cut the wires and the bell rang again. And so I'm not going back to the house.
Smart woman.
Yes. So she came out to LA. We made the pilot. And of course, Ghost Whisperer is about a woman who sees ghosts. And it's based on a real life woman named Marianne Winkowski, who was just like the most wonderful person ever. And not at all what one might expect when you think of someone who sees ghosts and can deal with the earthbound dead. Marianne is just this complete salt of the earth, Midwestern, down to earth, normal woman. Her husband's a Marine vet, buzz cut, tattoo. I mean, they're just the most normal people. But she has this gift. She sees the dead and she can convince them to cross over when they won't cross over. That was the whole plot of our show. And so I'm telling my producer about this problem. And he goes, so listen, you idiot. Why don't you call Marianne? You're making the show. Call the Ghost Whisperer. Call her and have her help you. So we finished shooting. And Marianne lives in Ohio. So we flew her here to New York, put her up at the Comfort Inn up the road. And she came to our house and she said, yes, there are two ghosts here. They don't like you very much. They like the people who lived here before you better. And when you're not home, they go to the people across the street and they haunt them.
Oh.
And so Marianne convinced them to go. She got some history about them and then convinced them to go. And they left. They found the light and off they went. And immediately, as soon as Marianne, there's no drama about this. It was just Marianne just kind of got quiet and said, okay, they're gone. And the minute she said that, the entire atmosphere of the house just changed. it just felt lighter. And the air just felt clearer. It was very difficult to describe, but even when we went downstairs where the washing machines were, it was suddenly like we can see things clearly where there had been this sort of odd haze there. And we never had a problem after that, at all. It was just gone, thanks to Marianne.
Don't you have another book or movie in that?
Maybe, probably, yes.
I've never heard anyone before that's had an experience like that and has, gone from the beginning to the end of it. And I find it fascinating that ghosts would go across the street. Did they miss haunting someone if you were gone?
Yeah, well, I guess according to Marianne, they feed on our energy. That's what keeps them strong. And so Marianne always says, the best thing to do is ignore them. Don't pay attention to them because they feed off your fear. So I guess they got tired. We weren't there, and and like Marianne says, cemeteries are not haunted. They're never haunted because there's no energy there. You're more likely to find a haunted bar, or, a haunted train station. But what's funny about it was that the denial, because you just feel like, even though I'm open to all these things and I've made a life in some ways out of horror, I just didn't want to believe it. And one morning I was making breakfast for my daughter, who was very young at the time, and she had these little cardboard crossword puzzles. Not a crossword, it was a little cardboard puzzle. And the back of the puzzle pieces were blank, and the other side had the image of the puzzle on them. And so I was getting her breakfast ready before school one day, before I left to do the pilot. And she had made the puzzle, had done it all. And I took her, I saw the, oh, good job, honey. I took a plate away, put it in the sink. I came back and the entire puzzle was upside down. All the pieces were upside down. And she was just staring at it. And I looked at it and there's no way that could have happened. In the split second I turned. And so I just chose not to believe it. I just said, it didn't happen. Didn't happen. I just went on with my day. It was really odd.
Now, did your daughter ever talk about experiencing anything with your visitors, your unwanted visitors?
Well, Marianne told us later that there was a ghost who had attached himself to Caitlin. And there was a house across the street and down the road a bit that had been a home for troubled kids.
Oh.
And so Marianne told us that I didn't want to get your daughter frightened, but this boy, who's about her age, has attached himself to her and he's kind of following her around. He hasn't really done anything, but he's kind of obsessed with her, and she got this kid to go away.
Was your daughter aware?
No, she didn't know. But we researched it, and there was a boy who would have been about her age at the time he died, who fell out of a window of that home back in the 60s, and he died. And Marianne was pretty sure that's who this kid was. Who knows? But another good story for a horror movie somewhere.
Exactly. No, it's wonderful. And who else, what other movie maker could say that he's once lived in a haunted house, his very own? Not too many, I imagine.
It's not, no, they do not.
Now, is there another book on the horizon?
Yes, there is I'm outlining a book now. It started its life as an idea for a screenplay, many years ago. And I could never really conquer it because it was such a complex story, so many characters and so many different points of view. And so I could never really solve it as a movie. And once I wrote this novel, I realized, man, this is a novel. This is how to do this. This is the, novelization is the tool I can use to tell the story, because I can do all these point of views. I can have an unreliable narrator. I can just do all this without having to worry about the constraints of a 3-act movie structure. So it's frustrating trying to find time for these things, but that is my next goal novel-wise is to get this written.
Okay. And in between film?
I hope to make The Desecrated as a movie.
Okay.
Working actively on that.
Have you mentally decided who you would like in the different parts, whether it can happen or not?
Yeah, I haven't really. The only person we have committed is my friend Stephen Lang, who you may know from Avatar, and just a brilliant actor. He's agreed to play Ulysses, and he's perfect for Ulysses. So we're off to a good start. But I haven't really. I tend to, when I write scripts, I tend not to think about actors at first. I just find it a little constraining. I'd rather just make up my own person and what they look like and feel like, and then we'll try to fit an actor into that later on.
Right. Well, sounds like a fascinating life that has kind of gone the way you wanted it to go from a very young age.
I guess for the most part, yes. I mean, I think, given how I started, it's pretty, I've had a pretty good run, and more to come.
Oh, absolutely. More to come. I don't think I have any more questions. I don't want to leave anything out on anybody. Let me double check. Nope. It's been a wonderful, anything else you want to tell us that we didn't ask you? Is there something you're just dying to tell us?
I just want to thank everybody who logged on and took part, and not only for listening to my spiel, but also just to be supporting bookstores and supporting books. And it's the bricks and mortar bookstore is so important to our lives, and our society, and I want to see them just succeed and thrive. And so I'm always appreciative of any support that we see for it and feel for it, and please keep doing it.
Well, those kind words are very welcomed. But I always we rely on authors like you who create something that we want to read. And so this is wonderful. I really appreciate your spending the time with us tonight. Anyone who's listening that wants a copy of this book, you have place an order with me. We've got it all set up to happen. And I thank you again for the time. It's been a pleasure. This has really been fascinating.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I'm going to open it up so people can wave goodbye to you. I'm going to.
Okay.
There we go. So
hey, everybody. There we go.
We want to thank you so much for all of it, and enjoyed the talk. And we look forward to the film.
Yes, great. I'll come back. When we make a movie, we'll come back and talk some more.
Absolutely. And you come to California.
Yes, I'm there all the time.
Bye-bye now.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.